We are talking to Steve Cortez. He is the president and senior political advisor at Catholic Vote about Papa Leo, the new pope, the first American, and I'm Catholic, so I'm pretty excited about this. Hi, Steve.
Hey, good morning. Yes, fantastic. And I think, there's obviously reason to be excited.
Yeah.
The first American, he happens to be, I'm from right where he grew up, the south suburbs of Chicago. So for me, and I'm younger than he is, so we didn't quite overlap. But for example, we share the same favorite pizza place, which is kind of a legendary place south of Chicago. So, but for all Americans, regardless of where you're from, it's an exciting moment and one that, frankly, a lot of us who are Catholic thought would never happen, that the Vatican thought America's so powerful in the world, we don't need to also give America the honor of a pope, but here we are.
Yeah, well, we didn't get the honor. He did, and he deserved it.
Right. Yes, and I think part of why he got it, by the way, is because while he's, very much thoroughly an American, a product of the United States, he also spent decades in Latin America. So he's from the Americas, plural, because, of course, he was a bishop in Peru before he then got stationed over at the Vatican in recent years as the head of global bishops. So a lot of experience, from the south side of Chicago to bishop in Peru to Vatican, senior Vatican official. Listen, I will tell you, I'm very excited about his papacy. I think there are already, even just, days into it, there are some really refreshing signs. He clearly seems to be somebody who will uphold Orthodox church teaching, even when it's not popular. For example, he has already reaffirmed the sanctity of unborn life and the evil of abortion, and he has already reaffirmed the definition of marriage, which governments around the world are seeking to redefine. But in God's principles, that simply can't be done. Marriage is between one man and one woman, and the Pope has already reaffirmed that 2,000-year tradition of the Catholic Church.
Okay, so a lot of people were saying, that before him, Pope Francis, or not Pope Francis, I'm sorry, can't even think of names now, the Pope who just passed, we'll go with. I did not care for him a whole lot because he was involving himself in politics and global warming and all this sort of thing. And he appointed a lot of cardinals. I mean, he appointed so many cardinals, and I was a little bit worried about this election process and the conclave because there were so many of them. It was worrisome for me.
No, understandable. By the way, I was worried as well, and I think a lot of faithful Catholics, especially if they're politically, right of center in the United States, were understandably worried because Francis was pretty brazenly political, right, in a way we have never seen from a pope before, and I frankly hope we don't see again.
Yeah.
I think this pope will be far more cautious, but yeah, to your point, 80%, 4 out of 5 of the voting cardinals for this conclave were appointed by Francis. So I think a lot of people, understandably, were worried, are we going to just get Francis 2.0? And I just do not believe that that's happened, though. And as Catholics, we believe that the Holy Spirit works in that conclave, so it's not just up to Francis and his wishes. And I'm hopeful that we have now a pope, and I really believe this, that we have a pope who's going to be a lot less political. And don't get me wrong, too. I mean, there are some worrisome signs with this new Pope Leo. For example, on climate and immigration, he's posted some things on social media in the past that were clearly contrary to what I believe and what the America First vision believes here in the United States. But he's not shown any evidence that he's so politicized as Francis was. And I think and again, the early statements from him, very bold, very countercultural in terms of reaffirming Christian philosophy and Catholic teaching on some really critical issues. That tells me that he's going to be a bold witness for Jesus and not just another political actor in the world.
And I want people to remember that the Catholic Church has had these rules. Sometimes the rules change, like, people say, well, they didn't have to be celibate or unmarried till this year or that year, and the church did this and the church did that. All of the churches have had, I don't want to say differences or changes go on within their inner walls throughout history. Every church has had that. But the Catholic Church has been pretty steadfast on a lot of things. But they label it as hate, and it's just not. It's just not allowed if you are a member of the church. But the door is still open, and nobody hates you.
Right. And by the way, regarding the door still being open, there's been some really good recent news here in the United States about young people returning to churches broadly, the Catholic Church and others. And that's great news, particularly young men. We're seeing a real resurgence among young men in church attendance, in belief, in fervor for the faith. And this is after years of declining the other way. We saw it sort of stabilize and now actually start to tick up broadly, but especially among young people. So I think a lot of folks in the United States and elsewhere around the world, are yearning for truth. And those of us who are Catholic believe that the fullness of truth is found in the Catholic Church. And that, we have tradition, capital T and small t. The capital T traditions are beliefs and principles that can never be changed, that come, we believe from Christ himself and that the church has always believed. But then there are small t traditions which can be changed, things like the celibacy of priests, which has now existed for centuries but didn't always exist. It could potentially be changed into the future. And that's, obviously not up to me, but that could be changed without violating capital T tradition. But I think that, when the Catholic Church is being authentic, it's one of the most powerful forces in the world. And, not powerful because of riches or armies, but powerful because of its moral force. And I think that with this Pope, I really believe the Church is going to become a far more powerful force for good in the world. And I'll give you an example, a very concrete example of that. Just yesterday, President Trump announced that there's going to be talks between Putin and Zelensky to try to end the war in Ukraine. And he suggested, not concrete yet, but he suggested that it be hosted by the Pope and the Vatican. I think that is a strong sign that President Trump sees the opportunity here and sees the value in the church and in this new Pope Leo, this American Pope. And if that does in fact happen, if that unfolds, and if peace in Ukraine is negotiated because of the leadership of President Trump, as well as the moral authority of Pope Leo, what an amazing feat that would be. And I know there's a long way before we get to that point, but wouldn't it be incredible if two American leaders, Pope Leo and Donald Trump, can end this war across the world in the Black Sea? And it's something we should work for and pray for.
Yeah, every day. And, Melania is very Catholic, and I know that she has a very large influence on Donald. And a lot of people are trying to keep him stuck in his past and say, well, he's this, he's that. And they're trying to label him things he's not, even if it doesn't matter what they say about him. They're going to make it the worst possible thing. But he is doing amazing things. But if anybody can do it, I think it's him. I really feel like the at least the chance to have the conversation is there. But I want to know how excited you were when the Pope did his first Mass, and it was in English. I could understand him. I was like, oh,
right.
The Pope's I think English.
Right. For Americans, and for that matter, probably for English speakers the world over, the Pope has always seemed to some extent, a foreigner, right, to us. There's always been some separation, right? And even if they did speak English, they spoke it with a heavy accent and, maybe not terribly well, right? So, of course, it's refreshing to hear a Pope speak perfect American Chicago version of English. I think it's a gift to us. And I hope and believe, too, that the Catholic Church in America is going to see a renewal because of this, that it's going to cause a lot of folks who maybe were curious to look more into the church, or even folks who have been hostile to the church to say, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I should take another look. So on various levels, the political, in terms of geopolitics, world affairs, as well as the spiritual and the conversion of souls, I think it's really, really exciting. And I got to be in Rome during what they call the interregnum. So after the previous Pope's death and before the conclave, and got to meet with a lot of senior church officials and everyone, while they were mourning Francis, at the same time, they were really excited about a new chapter. And I think now they're even more excited. And, one point on that, by the way, just as Americans, I actually just posted this on my social media. There's a picture of Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, and the Pope meeting after his inaugural Mass, meeting privately in the Pope's office. And I thought, what an amazing picture. These three Catholic men, all three of them have been entrusted with really major responsibilities, Vice President, Secretary of State, and the Pope. And there was a time in America when Catholics were second-class citizens. Thankfully, that is not at all the case now.
JFK.
And I thought just a wonderful picture.
Yeah, me too. And it's exciting for me because as a Catholic, I'm excited that religion is being talked about without negativity in politics right now. It used to be, freedom from religion instead of freedom of religion under the last administration and a few prior. And that's taken a turn. And I don't mean to go off topic here in the last 4 minutes we have left, but if you even watched shows like American Idol, almost all of the singers were singing about Jesus.
Right.
They were all going Christian. It was a theme.
Right. Well, and so many artists, of course, particularly singing, got their start in church, right? And yet the secularists would have us believe that the church is somehow anti-art, right? When the exact opposite is true. And I'll tell you, if you were fortunate enough to take a trip to the Vatican, you certainly realize that very quickly, right? What a promoter and patron of the arts the church has been, for time immemorial. But yeah, to your point too about faith in public life. The First Amendment was never about forbidding the church from being a factor and Christian believers from being a factor in public life. As a matter of fact, the opposite. If we have true Christian conviction, then that is not a Sunday way of life. That's not something that we compartmentalize and sort of put on a shelf when we then venture to politics. No, it infuses our entire worldview. And we should act as Christians, as believers in everything we do, in our workplace, in politics, at play, everything. And I think, thankfully, I think you're exactly correct. We're seeing that turn, and I think it's largely because of President Trump, which is somewhat paradoxical because he's not a man who, for most of his life, was known for his faith, right? Let's just be honest. He was not. Now, I think a lot's going on in his heart. You mentioned his wife being Catholic, and I think there's a lot of believers, both Protestant and Catholic, around him who have really moved him in many ways. But he has been, most of all, as president, a protector of Christians and a protector of faith broadly, even outside of Christianity in this country. And it's really needed and refreshing, and we need more faith in the public square, not less, in this country. And thankfully, I think that's trending, just like church attendance among the young, it's trending in a positive direction after trending pretty negatively for a long time.
Right. And I do want to draw attention to the fact that a lot of the people who I know who are gay, including some of my family members, they absolutely go to church. They know God doesn't hate them. They hate the sin, not the sinner. So anybody who walks into a church who thinks that they are sin-free has another guest coming. So the church is for sinners. That's what it's for. So it's a reawakening for everyone because we're at a point in time in our world where if you have hate in your heart and you hate people because they're married to someone who's a different color or, God forbid, a different religion. If you have hate in your heart for people because of earthly reasons, that is a gigantic sin that you're not going to overcome unless you are sorry for it and redeem yourself. So I want the haters out there to hear me loud and clear that this Pope is not about that. He's about tradition, yes, but he's not about hate.
Right. Of course, yeah. And listen, churches are hospitals for the sick, and we are all sick. Whether we want to admit it or not, we are. We're sick because of sin, right? And we need it. We need care. We need healing. We need the hospital, and the hospital is the church.
Yeah.
Yes, amen.
Yeah. So I have high hopes. By the way, this Pope does not like deep dish pizza. I hate to break it to all you Chicagoans. He does not like deep dish pizza, but he does like Chicago pizza. He likes
my pizza, which is it's a place called Aurelio's. It's Chicago tavern style, where it's a square cut, and it's more like New York pizza but better. If anyone gets a chance, if you're south of Chicago, please go to Aurelio's. It's the Pope's favorite pizza, and it's mine too.
Oh, that's so great. So I wonder what that's going to do for all the people who've come here, who have become citizens, who are Catholic. I mean, Africa's really pumping out a lot of priests. India's pumping out a lot of priests. We've got Christians who are being assaulted by Hindus and Muslims all over the world. I wonder if this is going to have an effect on some of this coming to an end.
I sure hope so, yes. I mean, because Christians are persecuted all over the world. And by the way, just to be blunt here, I think the worst mistake of Francis's papacy was the agreement he made with the Chinese Communist Party, where I think he effectively sold out Chinese Catholics and Chinese Christians who are being oppressed by the regime in Beijing. I hope that is undone by this Pope, and to the opposite point of view, I hope he views himself, I think he will, as a protector of those Christians, and that he uses the power of the pulpit that he has, the literal and metaphorical pulpit, to defend Christians oppressed all over the world, whether India, Africa, China, and elsewhere. So let's pray for that as well.
You kind of read my mind, because Pope Francis did make a deal with Xi Jinping, who wants to be seen as a god himself. He has his picture in the churches in China, and he is holding down Christians all over the country and almost making it impossible for them to worship. And Putin's doing the same thing. So hopefully we can get everybody's heads together and out of the clouds and back to reality, knowing that there is one true God and we all need to serve him. And having a Catholic Pope is just Hip, hip, hooray. I'm so excited. All right. Anything
Yes,
you want to say in the
amen.
last 30 seconds, Steve?
No, but just thank you. On many levels, this is really exciting. I've written pretty extensively about this. If any of your listeners want to read my thoughts and observations on this new pope, CortezInvestigates.com. Cortez with an S, CortezInvestigates.com. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.